A 7-year-old girl, silent and watchful, carries on her body the signs no one wants to see. Just one attentive look is enough to tear the veil and reveal the calculated abuse hidden beneath flawless appearances. But when the truth comes to light, an invisible network of care mobilizes, and a childhood begins to be rescued. 7-year-old Sophia Madison clutched her purple backpack to her chest as she walked through the corridors of Morningstar Academy, one of Miami's most prestigious schools. Her brown eyes, once bright, now carried a shadow that didn't suit her age. Her impeccably ironed uniform contrasted with her nails, bitten to the quick, and the hunched posture she had adopted in recent weeks. In the teacher's lounge, Teresa Campbell, a 55-year-old educator with 3 decades of experience, expressed her concern to Raphael Stone, the school's new social worker. "Something is wrong with Sophia, Raphael. She used to be a participative, cheerful girl. Now she barely raises her hand to answer questions. Her grades have plummeted, and she's already missed 22 days in less than 3 months, always with different doctor's notes." Raphael flipped through the student's file, noting the medical certificates signed by different professionals. His professional instinct, honed over years working at the Community Resource Center of South Beach, told him there was something deeper going on. "Teresa, have you noticed any change in her behavior that coincides with the start of her absences?" The teacher adjusted her colorful framed glasses, thinking for a moment. "Now that you mention it, it all started after her father remarried. He's an important businessman here in Miami, in the real estate sector. Sophia's mother passed away 3 years ago. Cancer, from what I heard, a great sadness. But the girl was recovering well until—" Raphael looked up from the file. "Until the new marriage. The stepmother, Lucy Vance, is much younger than the father, a former model, one of those who appear in society columns. Very elegant, always made up. Designer clothes. At parent-teacher meetings, she comes alone. The father is always traveling to New York City or out of the country." At that moment, the door to the room opened and Martha, the coordinator, entered holding a drawing. "Raphael, you asked to see Sophia's work, didn't you? I found this in the archives. She did it a month ago in art class." The drawing showed a huge mansion with all the windows closed. In a small corner of the page, a tiny figure, barely visible, stood alone, uncolored. "No sun in the sky. May I keep this?" Raphael asked. The coordinator nodded. "Of course. We're worried. Sophia even asked me the other day, crying, not to be expelled from school. She said it was the only place where she could breathe." Raphael put the drawing in his file and thanked her. As he left the teacher's lounge, he saw Sophia sitting alone in the courtyard while other children played. He approached carefully, sitting beside her. "Hi, Sophia. My name is Raphael. I work here at the school. Can I sit with you for a bit?" The girl merely shrugged, not looking at him. "You know, I'm admiring your backpack. It's very pretty. It was a gift from my mom," she replied in a low voice, "before she became a star." Raphael nodded, respecting the silence that followed. After a few minutes, he asked, "What's it like at home, Sophia? Do you like living there?" The reaction was immediate. The girl hunched over even more, clutching her backpack. "It's big. It has a pool," she answered mechanically. "And do you swim in the pool?" "I can't. Aunt Lucy says it wets the floor and makes work for the maids. Aunt Lucy is your dad's wife." Sophia nodded. "She said I'm not supposed to call her mom. Never." The bell rang, announcing the end of recess. Sophia got up quickly. "I have to go. If I'm late for class, I'll miss dessert again." Raphael watched her walk away, her small silhouette carrying an invisible weight on her shoulders. He decided it was time for a visit to the Madison residence. On his way to his office, he met Teresa Campbell again. "Raphael, I heard you talk to Sophia. There's one more thing that might be important. Last week, during snack time, I found her hiding food in her backpack. When I asked why, she said it was for when I have to stay in my room for a long time. I didn't understand at the time. But now?" The next day, Raphael drove his 2010 Ford Focus to Oceanfront Reserve Estates, one of the neighborhood's most luxurious gated communities. He identified himself at the gate as a social worker from Morningstar Academy. After a call to the residence, he was authorized to enter. The Madison mansion was impressive, 3 stories, modern architecture, impeccable garden. He was received by Lucy Vance, Sophia's stepmother. Tall, thin, perfectly aligned blonde hair and flawless makeup at 10 a.m. Good morning, Mr. Stone. To what do we owe the visit? Her voice was polite but cold as the marble that covered the entrance floor. Good morning. Ms. Vance, we are conducting visits to our students' families as part of a new school family integration program. Lucy led him to the living room. The environment was impeccably decorated, but completely devoid of any sign that a child lived there. Not a single toy, no children's books, no photo of Sophia. Is your husband home? Unfortunately not. Edward is on a business trip to London. He returns next week. She adjusted a strand of hair. Can I offer you some coffee? Thank you. Is Sophia home? I'd like to see her. A slight frown. Sophia is in therapy now. You know how it is, children need support, especially after losing their mother so young. Raphael nodded. It's good that she has that support. And how is she adapting? The new family, the new house? Perfectly. We have everything under control. The girl has the best money can buy. Lucy made a sweeping gesture indicating the house. First-class education, organic food, designer clothes. Edward spares no effort. And what about friends? Does Sophia socialize with other children outside of school? The woman crossed her legs, visibly uncomfortable with the questions. We carefully monitor her friendships. Not all children have the same social standing, you understand? We need to protect her from bad influences. Raphael took some notes in his notebook, discreetly observing the surroundings. On a side table, there were several photos of Lucy. At social events, on trips, always elegant. In only one of them did she appear with Edward and Sophia, all three smiling in a pose clearly staged for the photo. He also noticed a locked door in the hallway leading to the bedrooms. After a few more routine questions, Raphael thanked her and left. At the door, he was surprised by a child's voice coming from the stairs. Uncle Raphael! Sophia ran down the stairs, still in her pajamas, her hair disheveled. Nothing to indicate she had been in a therapy session. You came to see me? Her eyes sparkled for the first time. Before Raphael could respond, Lucy stepped between them. Sophia, what did I say about coming down without getting ready? Her voice was sweet, but her gaze was sharp. Go straight back upstairs. Can't you see we have a visitor? The girl murmured an apology and ran upstairs. Raphael noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the pajamas too big for her small body. I thought she was in therapy, he commented. Lucy smiled, without showing her teeth. The session was rescheduled. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have commitments. Back in his car, Raphael made detailed notes about everything he had observed. Something was very wrong in that house, and he wouldn't rest until he found out what. That same day, upon returning to the community resource center, he found a woman waiting for him. Dark-haired, middle-aged, with hands calloused from hard work. Are you Raphael Stone? My name is Eleanor. I was employed at the Madison House until last month, and there's something very serious you need to know about little Sophia. Eleanor Oliver had worked at the Madison Mansion for 2 years, having been hired shortly after the death of Clarice, Edward's first wife. Sitting in the small office of the Community Resource Center, her trembling hands held a folder. I worked there since Clarice passed. In the beginning, it was just Edward and the girl. He suffered a lot, you know, but he was a good father. After Lucy showed up, everything changed. Raphael offered a glass of water to the visibly nervous woman. What exactly changed, Eleanor? It started slowly. First, she complained about Sophia to her father. She said the girl was ill-mannered, that she didn't respect her. Then she started changing the house rules. Sophia could no longer eat at the table with them when they had guests. She said children should eat separately. Eleanor opened the folder she had brought and took out some photos taken with a cell phone. Look at this. The dinner table when they had guests, and Sophia's little plate separate in the kitchen. The photo showed a lavish table with several sophisticated dishes. In the next image, a colorful child's plate with a tiny portion of food. She said it was so Sophia wouldn't get chubby like her mother. But Clarice wasn't chubby, she was a normal woman. The girl started hiding food. When Lucy found out, she put a padlock on the refrigerator. Raphael felt a knot in his stomach as he flipped through the photos. The next one showed Sophia's room, impeccably tidy but without any personality. No toys in sight, no posters, no personal items beyond school books. And that locked door I saw in the hallway. Eleanor sighed. It's the punishment room. When Edward travels, which is almost always, Lucy locks Sophia in there when she does something wrong. She once left the girl there a whole night because she spilled juice on the living room rug. And what's in that room? Nothing. It's a small maid's room they don't use. It doesn't even have proper light, just a small window. No bed. Nothing. The girl sits on the floor. Raphael wrote everything down, his face showing the gravity of what he was hearing. There's more, Eleanor continued, showing another photo. This was the storybook Clarice used to read to Sophia every night. One day I found it in the trash, all torn. Sophia cried so much she even got a fever. The photo showed a children's book with a colorful cover, partially torn. I managed to save it and hid it with me. Sophia doesn't know. But every time the stepmother destroyed something of her mother's, it was like killing Clarice again. Why did you leave the job? Eleanor straightened her shoulders, a spark of dignity shining in her tired eyes. Because I couldn't stand being an accomplice anymore. Last month, Lucy started rationing even the water Sophia could drink. She said it was so she wouldn't wet the bed, but the girl never did that. It was just pure malice. One day I secretly gave her water. Lucy saw it and fired me on the spot. Raphael noticed that Eleanor was trembling, not from fear but from indignation. She's destroying that child, Mr. Stone, and the father doesn't even see what's happening. When he's home, Lucy is a different person. All affectionate with Sophia, all worried. Pure act. After more than 2 hours of conversation, Raphael had a much clearer picture of the situation. He thanked Eleanor, who promised to be available to testify if necessary. Just please protect Sophia. That girl has suffered too much. In the following days, Raphael intensified his investigation. Through the school, he managed to access Sophia's academic history since kindergarten. The reports clearly showed the change. Up to 6 months ago, she was described as an exemplary student, participative, and sociable. The drop in grades and behavior coincided exactly with her father's new marriage. During a meeting at the Community Resource Center, Raphael presented the case to Dr. Claudia Reynolds, a forensic psychologist who collaborated with the institution. The signs are clear of emotional neglect and possible psychological abuse, the psychologist confirmed after analyzing the evidence. We need a direct assessment with the child. With the school administration's authorization, they organized a session with Sophia during school hours, presented as a routine child development activity to avoid raising suspicion. On the appointed day, Dr. Claudia met with Sophia in a welcoming room at the school, decorated with colorful drawings and toys. At first the girl was reserved, answering questions with monosyllables, but gradually through games and playful activities, she began to open up. This is the family game, the psychologist explained, presenting small wooden figures. Can you build your house and show me where each person stays? Sophia picked up the pieces carefully. She placed the father's figure far away, almost off the board. The stepmother was in the center of the house, occupying the largest space. The figure representing herself was placed in a small corner, isolated. And where do you stay when you're happy? Claudia asked. The girl thought for a moment and then moved her piece outside the house. At school, she replied simply. Throughout the session, through drawings and stories, Sophia unwittingly revealed the routine of isolation and control she was subjected to. She spoke about the special rules when her father traveled, about how she had to be very quiet not to irritate Aunt Lucy, about how she missed her mother and couldn't even talk about her at home. Aunt Lucy says my mom didn't really love me, that she left because she didn't want me anymore, she recounted, her eyes welling up. But Miss Campbell said that's a lie, that my mom became a star because she was sick, not because she wanted to leave. After almost 2 hours, Dr. Claudia ended the session with a warm hug, promising they would meet again. As soon as Sophia left, Raphael entered the room. So? The psychologist had a grave expression. I have no doubt that we are facing a case of systematic psychological abuse. The stepmother is deliberately undermining this child's self-esteem, isolating her, and using her mother's memory as an instrument of psychological torture. The father, by omission, is allowing this to happen. What would be your professional recommendation? It was immediate intervention. Sophia is developing symptoms of severe anxiety and childhood depression. There is a risk of permanent damage to her emotional development if this continues. Raphael nodded, determined. I will initiate formal procedures today. Over the next week, Raphael gathered all the evidence, The testimonies of Eleanor and the school staff, the photos, the psychologist's report, the school history showing the abrupt change in the child's behavior, the suspicious medical certificates. He organized everything into a detailed dossier that was presented to the South Beach Child Protective Services. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Raphael, Lucy Vance was also not idle. Noticing the social worker's interest, she began to construct her own narrative. She posted various photos with Sophia on social media, in seemingly happy moments. A trip to the mall, a visit to a water park, a family breakfast. The caption spoke of unconditional love and motherhood of the heart. She also contacted the school principal, expressing concern about the invasive behavior of the new social worker. With perfectly calculated tears in her eyes, she mentioned how she was doing everything to help Sophia overcome the loss of her mother, and how the school's constant interventions were destabilizing the girl. While the case went through its bureaucratic procedures, Sophia remained trapped in her own little hell. At school, Teresa Campbell noticed purple bruises on the girl's arms. When questioned, Sophia merely said she fell down the stairs. The teacher immediately informed Raphael, who included the fact in the process. On a rainy June morning, South Beach Child Protective Services made a surprise visit to the Madison mansion. Lucy, caught off guard, couldn't maintain her perfect facade. The counselors found Sophia locked in the punishment room, without food since the previous night, for having spoken her mother's name during dinner. The decision was unanimous, an emergency protective order, with immediate removal of the child to a temporary shelter while the case was investigated more deeply. Lucy, furious, immediately contacted her lawyer. The renowned Oliver Sampson, a specialist in defending Miami's elite, Edward Madison, who was in Tokyo closing a major deal, was informed by phone about his daughter's removal. He took the first flight back to the United States, confused and indignant about the situation. Meanwhile, at a city shelter in Northwood, Sophia slept peacefully for the first time in months, without fear of being punished for dreaming of her mother. Edward Madison disembarked at Miami International Airport with the expression of someone who hadn't slept in days. Wearing a wrinkled suit and unshaven, an unusual sight for those who knew him as the always impeccable CEO of Madison Holdings, he was met by Oliver Sampson, his longtime lawyer and friend. "What is this madness, Oliver? How can they take my daughter like that, without rhyme or reason?" Edward threw his briefcase onto the back seat of the imported car and ran a hand through his graying hair. "Calm down, Edward. We're handling it. Lucy is devastated, of course. A rookie social worker and a resentful ex-employee cooked up this whole circus." Oliver maneuvered the vehicle out of the parking lot. "We've already filed a request for reconsideration of the protective order. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow." On the way home, Oliver updated Edward on the situation, presenting a carefully edited version of the facts. An inexperienced social worker, influenced by an employee fired for cause, had convinced Child Protective Services that Sophia was being mistreated. All a big misunderstanding that would be easily resolved. Upon arriving home, Edward found Lucy seemingly devastated. Red eyes, pale face, wearing simple clothes. A complete opposite image to her usual elegance. "Edu, thank goodness you're here." She threw herself into her husband's arms, sobbing. "It was horrible. They invaded our house, treated me like a criminal, scared Sophia. The poor thing was so confused." "You need to do something." Edward hugged her, trying to process everything. Something about the situation didn't add up. He had known Lucy for less than 2 years. A quick romance that began at a charity event and culminated in marriage 6 months later. His late wife, Clarice, was the opposite. A university professor, simple, completely dedicated to their daughter. Lucy, on the other hand, was from the world of fashion and social events and had never shown much interest in children. Where did they take Sophia? A filthy city shelter. Our daughter, accustomed to every comfort, is now among all kinds of children, eating second-rate food, sleeping on a cot. Lucy intensified her crying. Edward frowned. "She's not our daughter, Lucy. She's my daughter with Clarice." A flash of irritation crossed Lucy's face, so fast that Edward almost didn't notice. "Of course, darling, it was just a figure of speech. You know how much I love Sophia, as if she were my own." While Lucy prepared tea, Edward went up to his daughter's room. Something deeply bothered him about this whole story. He observed the environment with new eyes. Spacious room, expensive furniture, but strangely impersonal. No toys in sight, no drawings on the walls. It looked more like a luxury hotel room than a 7-year-old sanctuary. He opened the closet. Clothes perfectly, organized by color, all clearly chosen by an adult. No pieces with children's characters, nothing colorful or fun. Where were his daughter's belongings? The dolls she loved so much. The storybooks? At the back of the closet he found a small hidden box. Inside, some crumpled drawings and an old photo. Clarice and Sophia in the garden of the house where they lived before, both smiling under the sun. On the back of the photo, a message written in Clarice's unmistakable handwriting. My little sunflower always turning towards the light. Mommy loves you forever. Edward felt his eyes well up. How could he have allowed Clarice's memory to fade like this in his daughter's life? He put the photo in his pocket and went downstairs, determined to find out what was really happening. On the ground floor, he surprised Lucy on the phone. She didn't see him coming and spoke in a low but firm tone. I told you everything is under control. Edward believed everything, as always. Tomorrow he'll sort out this nonsense, and everything will go back to normal. No, the brat won't say anything. She's too terrified. Look, I need to hang up. He could show up at any moment. When she turned and saw her husband, Lucy almost dropped the phone. Edu, I didn't hear you come down. I was just talking to my sister. She's so worried about us. Edward nodded without showing that he had heard part of the conversation. I need to see Sophia now. But darling, it's already night. The shelter won't allow visits at this hour. I'm her father. They'll have to allow it. Meanwhile, at the shelter, Sophia was greeted by Brenda, a 60-year-old woman who had coordinated the facility for over 2 decades. Come, my dear. We'll show you where you'll sleep tonight. The shelter was not the desolate place Lucy had described. It was a large old house, but well-maintained, with colorful walls and children's drawings everywhere. In the shared room, there were 6 beds, each with different quilts. 3 other girls close to Sophia's age were already there, curious about the new arrival. Girls, this is Sophia. She'll be with us for a little while. Be kind, okay? Brenda introduced. Sophia, these are Annie, Juliana, and Caitlin. The girls smiled and waved. Annie, the youngest, approached with a teddy bear. Want to hold popcorn? He always makes me feel better when I'm scared. Sophia looked at the teddy bear in astonishment, as if she didn't know what to do with a toy. Slowly, she extended her hands and took it, hugging it to her chest. Thank you, she murmured, surprised by the unexpected kindness. That night, after a simple but nutritious dinner, the girls sat in a circle on the floor of the room telling stories. Sophia remained silent, just observing. When it was time for bed, Brenda appeared with a book. Who wants a story tonight? The girls excitedly raised their hands. Sophia hesitated but eventually raised hers too. Once upon a time, Brenda began, a little sunflower seed planted in a gloomy garden. Sophia listened, fascinated to the story of the little seed that, even in the shade, grew seeking the sun, becoming the tallest and brightest flower in the garden. Before the story ended, she had already fallen asleep, still hugging the borrowed teddy bear. The next day, Edward drove to the Miami-Dade County Courthouse for the preliminary hearing. He was met by his lawyer, who was already preparing arguments to overturn the protective order. While waiting in the hallway, Edward noticed a young man sitting on the other side, flipping through a thick folder. That's him, Oliver whispered. Raphael Stone, the social worker who started all this. Ignoring his lawyer's instructions, Edward stood up and crossed the hallway. Mr. Stone? I'm Edward Madison, Sophia's father. Raphael looked up, surprised by the direct approach. Mr. Madison, I want to know exactly why you took my daughter from home. What did you see? What happened? Before Raphael could answer, the door to the courtroom opened, and Judge Marina Grant of the Juvenile and Family Court called everyone in. The hearing was tense. On one side, Oliver Sampson presented Edward as a dedicated father, who, despite the demands of his career, had always ensured the best for his daughter. Lucy was described as an affectionate stepmother, unjustly accused. He showed carefully selected photos of seemingly happy moments, testimonials from people in their social circle attesting to the family's harmony. On the other side, Raphael presented the dossier with the collected evidence, Eleanor's detailed testimony, photos of the punishment room, the psychologist's report, the school history showing the abrupt change in the child's behavior, the suspicious medical certificates. Your Honor, Raphael concluded, we are not just talking about an unhappy child. We are talking about a child systematically isolated, deprived of social contact, emotional expression, and even basic needs like adequate food. Sophia is showing clear signs of psychological trauma. The judge, a middle-aged woman known for her seriousness, listened to both sides attentively. In the end, she made a decision that surprised everyone. I order the maintenance of the protective order for another 15 days, during which period Sophia Madison will remain in the city shelter, with the right to supervised visits from her father. During this period, a complete psychosocial evaluation will be carried out, including individual interviews with all involved. I also order an investigation into the financial movements of accounts designated for Sophia's expenses. Edward, although displeased at not being able to take his daughter home immediately, felt a strange relief. Part of him wanted to better understand what was happening before returning to the previous routine. Lucy, on the other hand, could not hide her indignation. This is absurd. Are they going to leave that child in that horrible place for another 2 weeks? And they still want to snoop into our accounts. We are a respectable family. The judge looked directly at her. Ms. Vance, what is on trial here is not the family's social status, but the well-being of a child. And I must remind you that emotional outbursts do not help your cause. Upon leaving the courthouse, Edward informed Lucy that he was going to visit Sophia immediately. But Edu, we already arranged to have lunch with the investors for the waterfront project. It's very important, you know. Cancel it. My daughter is more important than any business. For the first time since they had met, Edward clearly saw Lucy's mask fall. A cold glint crossed her eyes and her mouth twisted into an expression of contempt. Your daughter. Always that spoiled girl. Do you know how much it costs me to be St. Clarice's replacement? And when do I get any recognition? Stunned, Edward watched the woman who suddenly seemed like a stranger. Before he could respond, Oliver intervened, pulling Lucy by the arm. It's not the time, Lucy. Come on, you two need to calm down. Edward took a step back. I think you'd better go home, Lucy. I'm going to see Sophia, and then we need to talk, seriously. As Lucy walked away with Oliver, Edward turned to Raphael, who was still putting away his documents. Mr. Stone, I think I need your help. I want to understand exactly what's happening to my daughter. Raphael hesitated for a moment, surprised by the change in Edward Madison's attitude. Just minutes ago, the businessman seemed determined to discredit his work. Now he was seeking his help. Mr. Madison, I can take you to the shelter to see your daughter. On the way, we can talk more. In Raphael's modest Ford Focus, a striking contrast to the luxury cars Edward was accustomed to, the two men headed towards the city shelter. Edward watched the streets of Miami as if seeing them for the first time, lost in thought. I never imagined I'd be in this situation, he confessed, breaking the silence. I always thought I was doing the best for Sophia, giving her everything money could buy. Raphael kept his eyes on the road. Sometimes what a child needs most isn't something money can buy, Mr. Madison. Call me Edward, please. He sighed deeply. Ever since Clarice passed, I've been trying to compensate for her absence by working more, earning more. As if that could fill the void. And Miss Vance, how did she enter the picture? Edward looked out the window, watching a group of children playing in a park. I met Lucy at a charity event for children with cancer. The irony doesn't escape me now. She seemed so sensitive, so interested in my story. She was the first woman after Clarice's death who made me feel less alone. He paused. The marriage was quick, I know. Perhaps rushed. I thought Sophia needed a maternal figure, and Lucy seemed perfect. Raphael nodded without judging. And when was the last time you spent a whole day with your daughter? Just the two of you? The question hit Edward like a punch. He tried to remember and couldn't. My God, he murmured. I can't even remember. Upon arriving at the shelter, they were greeted by Brenda, who led them to a welcoming room where the children were doing activities. Sophia was sitting in a corner, drawing intently. She wore simple clothes borrowed from the shelter, denim overalls and a colorful t-shirt, so different from the designer clothes she used to wear. Even so, she seemed more relaxed than Edward remembered seeing her in recent months. When she noticed her father's presence, Sophia froze, her colored pencil suspended in the air. Her face expressed a mixture of joy and apprehension. "Daddy?" Edward knelt, opening his arms. After a moment of hesitation, Sophia ran to him, hugging him tightly. "I missed you, Princess," he whispered, feeling her small body tremble. "Forgive me for being away for so long." Brenda indicated a private room where they could talk. Edward noticed that Sophia glanced at Raphael, as if seeking approval, and only then followed her father. In the small room decorated with children's drawings, Edward sat beside his daughter. For the first time in a long time, he really looked at her. Her brown hair like her mother's, her large expressive eyes, now marked by light dark circles. She was thinner than he remembered, and there was a tension in her shoulders that no child should carry. "How are you, Sophia?" "Good," she replied automatically, a conditioned reflex. "Really, honey, you can tell me the truth." Sophia looked at her own hands, small and with bitten nails. "It's nice here. The food is good. The other girls are nice to me. Brenda tells stories every night." She paused. "When are we going home?" Edward felt a lump in his throat. "I don't know yet, Princess, but I'm working on it. Is Aunt Lucy mad at me?" The question, asked in a low, fearful voice, broke Edward's heart. "Why would she be mad at you?" Sophia shrugged. "I always do everything wrong. She says I'm clumsy, that I talk too much, that I eat too much, that I'm not an elegant young lady like she wanted." Edward gently took his daughter's hands. "Sophia, look at me. You don't do anything wrong. You are perfect exactly as you are." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "But what about the rules? Aunt Lucy has a lot of rules when you travel. She'll be very mad if she knows I told." "What rules, honey?" Sophia looked at the door, as if fearing someone might be listening, and then whispered, "I can't talk about Mommy. I can't eat without permission. I can't make noise. I can't leave things out of place. If I break the rules, I go to the dark room." Edward felt a wave of nausea. "The dark room?" "It's a small room with no light. Aunt Lucy locks me in there when I do bad things. Sometimes I stay there a long time. I'm scared of the dark, Daddy." At that moment, Edward Madison felt something break inside him. How could he have been so blind? How could he have allowed his daughter to live terrified while he closed deals around the world? "Sophia," he said, holding back tears, "I promise nothing bad will happen to you. Never again. Do you understand?" "Never again." The girl nodded, still uncertain. "Can I stay here a little longer? Annie lent me her teddy bear." "I've never had a teddy bear." The simple words were like a knife in Edward's heart. Clarice had filled their daughter's room with stuffed animals. Where were they all now? "Of course, my love. I'll visit you every day, I promise." As he left the room, Edward found Raphael talking to Brenda. Both noticed his devastated expression. "She told you," Raphael stated, more as an observation than a question. Edward nodded, unable to speak. "Mr. Madison," Brenda interjected, with the wisdom of someone who had seen many similar cases, "your daughter is an incredible girl. Strong, intelligent, but she's very hurt inside. She will need time and help to recover." "I will give her all that," Edward assured, "and more." Upon leaving the shelter, Edward was determined. "Raphael, I need to know more about what was happening in my house when I wasn't there, and I need to understand who Lucy Vance really is." "I have some contacts who can help," Raphael replied, "but there's something you can do yourself." The judge authorized an investigation into the accounts related to Sophia. "Do you maintain any kind of fund for her?" "Yes, a trust fund established when she was born. Clarice insisted on it. It's managed by the bank, but Lucy has access as co-guardian for expenses related to Sophia. I suggest you request a detailed statement of that fund immediately." Edward made a call from the car, using his influence to get access to the statements the same day. Meanwhile, Raphael activated his own contacts. They arranged to meet again in the late afternoon at Edward's office. Upon arriving there, Raphael found the businessman sitting before a pile of documents, his face pale. "It's worse than I imagined," Edward said, pushing the bank statements towards the social worker. "In the last 6 months since I gave Lucy access, withdrawals from Sophia's fund have quadrupled. But expenses for my daughter's education, health and clothing represent less than 20% of that amount." Raphael examined the documents, noting the patterns. "Look at this," Edward pointed out. "Purchases in luxury boutiques, jewelry stores, spas. Everything classified as personal expenses of the Guardian. How could I be so foolish? You trusted your wife. You're not the first and won't be the last to be deceived by someone close. Edward stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of historic Miami. There's more, he said, picking up another document. I requested a check of the house's security cameras. Look what I found. The video showed Lucy entering Sophia's room when the girl wasn't there, rummaging through drawers, finding something, apparently the box Edward had discovered, and destroying several drawings and photos. She was systematically erasing the memories Sophia had of her mother, Raphael noted, and I allowed it to happen, thinking only of expanding business, building an empire. Edward slammed his fist on the table. What kind of father does that? A father who now has a chance to fix things, Raphael replied, gently. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Lucy was meeting with her lawyer, Oliver Sampson, in a discreet cafe. We need to act fast, she said, nervously adjusting her pearl necklace. Edward is strange, distant. I'm sure that social worker filled his head with nonsense. Oliver took a sip of coffee, pensive. Lucy, be honest with me. What was really happening in that house? She rolled her eyes. Nothing much. The girl is spoiled. She needs discipline. And that room they talk so much about wasn't a dungeon. It was just a place for her to think about what she did wrong. And the accusations of food restriction? Please! The brat ate like a little savage. I was just teaching her good manners. Besides, girls need to learn early on to control their weight, or they'll end up like her mother, chubby and dull. Oliver leaned back in his chair, observing his client carefully. He had known Edward for years, and always considered him an honorable man. Lucy, on the other hand, had recently entered his life, and now he was beginning to question her true intentions. And what about Sophia's trust fund? The accusations are of misuse. Lucy shrugged. Nonsense. I'm a legal guardian. I'm entitled to compensation for the work of caring for that child. You have no idea what it's like to be a stepmother, Oliver. All the work, none of the credit. I understand. Well, we'll need a strong strategy for the next hearing. Judge Grant is not easy to convince. As they left the cafe, they didn't notice the presence of Martha Quinn, an investigative journalist for the Miami Herald, who was sitting at a nearby table and had overheard much of the conversation. Martha had started investigating the case after receiving an anonymous tip about Sophia's situation. The case had piqued her interest because it involved prominent figures in Miami society. She mentally noted the details she had just heard and decided to deepen her investigation. That same night, Martha sought out Raphael Stone at the Community Resource Center. She identified herself as a journalist and explained her interest in the case. I can't comment on details, it's a confidential process, Raphael explained cautiously. I understand perfectly. I'm not asking you to break professional secrecy. I'm conducting an independent investigation. I just overheard a very interesting conversation between Lucy Vance and her lawyer. Raphael raised his eyebrows. What kind of conversation? Martha recounted what she had heard, including the derogatory comments about Sophia and her deceased mother, and the admission of using money from the trust fund. This confirms much of what we already knew, Raphael commented. There's more, Martha continued. I started investigating Lucy Vance's past. I discovered interesting patterns. She has a history of relationships with wealthy men, usually widowers or divorcees with children. In at least 2 previous cases, there were accusations of ill treatment of stepchildren that ended up being suppressed with financial settlements. Raphael's eyes widened. Do you have proof of that? I'm gathering it. With your permission, I'd like to talk to some people involved in the current case, respecting, of course, legal limitations. I need to consult the judge first, Raphael replied thoughtfully. But if the intention is to bring to light a pattern of behavior that can protect not only Sophia, but potentially other children in the future. Exactly. Investigative journalism with purpose. While Raphael and Martha talked, Edward was making a radical change in his life. He cancelled all scheduled trips for the next few months, delegated responsibilities at the company, and informed his secretary that he would be working remotely indefinitely. Then he went to the mansion. Upon entering, he found Lucy on the phone, laughing carelessly. Seeing him, she quickly hung up, resuming the facade of a worried wife. "Edu, darling. How was it with Sophia? Did she ask about me?" Edward stared at her, seeing beyond the mask for the first time. "We need to talk. Lucy. About Sophia's trust fund, about what was happening in this house when I traveled, and about who you really are, Lucy's." Expression hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, and I believe it's time we laid our cards on the table." Lucy Vance had always been a master at controlling situations. Throughout her life, she had learned to manipulate perceptions, to create versions of herself that served specific purposes. But at that moment, facing Edward in the living room of the mansion she had conquered as a trophy, she felt control slip from her hands for the first time. "I don't know what you're talking about, Edward. That social worker filled your head with lies." Edward walked calmly to the bar and poured himself a finger of whiskey, something he rarely did. He needed that strength for the conversation to come. "It's interesting how you immediately assume I talked to Raphael without me even mentioning it." He took a sip. "But it wasn't his words that convinced me, Lucy. It was my daughters and the bank statements, and the security camera recordings you apparently forgot existed." Lucy's perfectly made-up face paled. "What recordings?" "The ones that show you destroying memories of Sophia's mother. The ones that show you locking my daughter in that little room for the most absurd reasons. The ones that show you discarding food she was hiding for fear of going hungry." Lucy feigned tears that didn't come. Realizing that the usual tactic wouldn't work, she changed strategy. "Edward, you don't understand the pressure. This house, your daughter, your expectations. I tried to be the perfect wife, the perfect stepmother, but Sophia never accepted me. She always used her mother's memory against me, always challenged me. She's 7 years old, Lucy." Edward's voice was colder than ever before. The 7-year-old child who lost her mother and was abandoned by a father who was too busy building an empire. A vulnerable child whom you deliberately terrorized. Terrorized? What an exaggeration. I only set limits, discipline. Something you never did. Edward shook his head, weary. "Do you know what Sophia told me today? That she never had a teddy bear. My daughter, who once had a room full of stuffed animals that her mother gave her. Where are they, Lucy? Where are her toys? Her books? Clarice's photos?" Lucy's silence was more revealing than any answer. "It's over, Lucy. I want you out of this house by tomorrow." "You can't do that." Her voice rose an octave. "I'm your wife. I have rights. And Sophia is my daughter. I should have protected her from the beginning. I won't make the same mistake twice." He placed the glass on the table. "Talk to your lawyer. Mine will contact you about the terms of the separation." Lucy let out a bitter laugh. "You think it's that simple? That you can just discard me like this? I have proof, Edward. Proof that you knew what was happening. That you approved of my methods. It will be your word against mine. And I'm very good at making people believe me." Edward smiled, a sad smile. "That's where you're wrong, Lucy. It won't be my word against yours. It will be your word against the truth. A truth with evidence, witnesses, and most importantly, Sophia's own voice." When Edward left the room, Lucy remained motionless, the world she had so carefully built crumbling around her. The next day, the article by Martha Quinn graced the front page of the Miami Herald's City section. The hidden face of privilege, the Sophia Madison case. The report, carefully written to respect the judicial secrecy involving minors, drew parallels between the ongoing case and other similar ones involving children from Miami's high society. Without directly naming Lucy, the journalist exposed a pattern of behavior by figures who use strategic marriages as a way of social ascent, with devastating consequences for vulnerable stepchildren. The article had the effect of a bomb in the city's social circles. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the case, and many who had previously supported Lucy began to distance themselves. Old stories previously suppressed came to light. A former nanny from another family with whom Lucy had been involved contacted Martha to report similar situations that occurred years earlier. Edward, for his part, temporarily moved into a hotel, leaving the mansion for Lucy to arrange her departure. In the morning, he visited Sophia at the shelter, carrying a package. "Hello, Princess." He hugged his daughter, noting that she seemed more relaxed each day, away from the pressure of the house. "I brought something for you." Sophia opened the package carefully. Inside there was a new teddy bear, brown with a blue ribbon around its neck. "It's just the beginning," Edward explained. "Little by little, we'll get back everything you lost. Or rather, we'll build new things together." The girl hugged the stuffed animal, her eyes shining. "Can I give him a name?" "Of course." "What name do you want to give him?" Sophia thought for a moment. "Clarice." "Like Mommy?" Edward felt his eyes well up. "That's a perfect name, my love." In the shelter director's office, Edward met with Brenda and Raphael to discuss the next steps. "The final hearing is scheduled for next week," Raphael informed. "The evidence is compelling. Judge Grant has already received the financial report, the recordings and the testimonies, including the psychologist's report." "What happens next?" Edward asked. "If all goes as we expect, Sophia will be released to return home under your guardianship, probably with mandatory psychological counseling for both of you and periodic visits from social workers for some time." Edward nodded. "And what about Lucy?" Raphael exchanged a glance with Brenda. "She will lose any rights to guardianship or custody, and, depending on the judge's decisions, she may face civil consequences for the financial misappropriations." "I don't want revenge," Edward clarified. "I just want to protect my daughter and help her recover." Brenda smiled, approving of his attitude. "And for that, Mr. Madison, you will need to be truly present, not just physically but emotionally." "I have reorganized my life for that," he assured. "I have already delegated a large part of my responsibilities in the company. Sophia will be my absolute priority from now on." After the meeting, Edward drove to the cemetery where Clarice was buried. How long had it been since he visited his wife's grave? He placed a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite flowers, on the headstone. "Forgive me, Clarice," he whispered. "I failed you. I failed our daughter. But I promise I will fix this. I will take care of our little sunflower, as I should have from the beginning." On the morning of the final hearing, a week later, Miami awoke to heavy rain. Edward arrived early at the courthouse, accompanied by his new lawyer, Paul Rivers. A family law specialist, Oliver Sampson, had withdrawn from the case, citing conflict of interest. Raphael was already there, talking to Dr. Claudia. Together they had prepared a complete presentation of the evidence, organized chronologically to demonstrate the pattern of abusive behavior. Lucy arrived shortly after, impeccably dressed in a discreet navy blue suit, the image of the dedicated and wronged stepmother. She was accompanied not only by her lawyer, but also by a private psychologist, Dr. Eliza Miller, known for her convenient diagnoses for wealthy clients. The hearing began promptly at 9 a.m. Sophia was not present, spared by the judge from the stress of facing the court. In her place, there was the video testimony collected by the forensic psychologist, where the girl, in age-appropriate language, described life under Lucy's guardianship. "When Daddy travels, Aunt Lucy changes the rules," Sophia said in the video, distractedly playing with blocks as she spoke. "She hides food and says I can only eat at the right time, just a little bit. If I sneak food, I go to the dark room. She says I'm too fat, that no one will like me that way." Lucy watched impassively, although her lawyer seemed increasingly uncomfortable. "I can't talk about Mommy," Sophia continued. "Once I showed Aunt Lucy a picture of her, and she tore it. She said my mom didn't really love me, that she had abandoned me. But I know it's not true. My mom is in the stars," Ms. Campbell explained. Lucy's defense tried to discredit the testimony, claiming the child was being manipulated, that she had mythomaniac tendencies, a term promptly refuted by Dr. Claudia as completely inappropriate and without any diagnostic basis. Next came the testimonies of Eleanor, Ms. Campbell and other school staff, all corroborating the same story. A child who had changed drastically after her father's new marriage, showing clear signs of psychological distress. Lucy's defense counterattacked with testimonies from people in her social circle, attesting to her exemplary character and her qualities as a stepmother. She presented carefully selected photos of seemingly happy moments, trying to construct the image of a harmonious family. The turning point came when Raphael presented the financial evidence, detailed statements, showing how Sophia's trust fund had been systematically drained for Lucy's personal expenses. Jewelry, designer clothes, cosmetic procedures, all classified as expenses related to the guardian's well-being. "Your Honor," Lucy's lawyer argued, "the law allows guardians to be compensated for their work. Miss Vance dedicates herself fully to the care of her stepdaughter. That's when Edward asked permission to speak. The judge, after a moment of reflection, agreed. Lucy never dedicated herself to Sophia, he declared, his voice firm. I allowed this to happen because I was absent, because I prioritized business over my daughter. It's something I will regret forever and work tirelessly to correct. But I cannot remain silent in the face of the suggestion that Lucy deserves compensation for caring for my daughter, when in fact what she did was systematically terrorize her. The judge listened carefully to each argument. Finally, when the last piece of evidence was presented, she requested an hour to deliberate. The atmosphere in the courthouse corridor was tense. Edward remained alone, refusing to interact with Lucy, who in turn spoke animatedly on the phone as if nothing serious was happening. Finally, everyone was called back into the room. Judge Marina Grant, with her characteristic seriousness, delivered her decision. This court, after careful analysis of the evidence presented, determines the definitive removal of any right of guardianship or custody by Ms. Lucy Vance in relation to the minor Sophia Madison. I also order the full restitution of the amounts improperly used from the minor's trust fund. With interest and monetary correction, Lucy paled, but maintained her composure. As for Mr. Edward Madison, the judge continued, the court restores full custody of his daughter under the following conditions. Mandatory psychological counseling for both father and daughter for a minimum period of 1 year. Periodic home visits by a social worker appointed by the court, and participation in a parental guidance program. These measures aim not only at Sophia's emotional recovery, but also at strengthening family bonds that were severely compromised. Edward nodded, accepting the conditions with humility and determination. Finally, the judge concluded, I order the forwarding of a full copy of this process to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of possible civil offenses committed by Ms. Vance. Upon leaving the courtroom, Edward felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Raphael approached, extending his hand. Congratulations, Edward. Sophia can go home tomorrow. Not to that house, he replied, determined. We'll start from scratch in a new place, without painful memories. As they talked, Martha Quinn discreetly approached. Mr. Madison, I know this is a delicate moment, but I'd like to inform you that I will continue investigating similar cases. What happened to Sophia is not isolated. There are other children in similar situations who need help. Edward looked at the journalist with renewed respect. Count on me for whatever is necessary. No child should go through what my daughter went through. That afternoon, Edward prepared a surprise for Sophia. With the judge's authorization, he took her to see the new apartment he had rented, a spacious and sunny place, with a view of the Miami River. This is our new beginning. Princess, he said, opening the door to what would be her room. What do you think? Sophia entered the empty room, looking around curiously. The white walls were like a blank canvas waiting to come to life. Can I choose the color? She asked shyly. Of course you can. This is your space. You can choose everything. The color of the walls, the curtains, the furniture. The girl's eyes sparkled with excitement. I want yellow, like the sunflowers Mommy planted. Yellow it will be, Edward agreed, hugging his daughter. And tomorrow we'll start decorating. In the evening, as they returned to the shelter, where Sophia would spend her last night, the girl asked a question Edward expected, but for which he had no ready answer. Daddy, is Aunt Lucy going to live with us in the new house? Edward took a deep breath. No, my love. Aunt Lucy won't be living with us anymore. It will just be you and me for a while. Sophia was silent for a moment, processing the information. Finally, with a wisdom beyond her years, she said, It's okay. I think we need to learn how to be a family again. Edward felt his eyes well up. Yes, Princess. That's exactly what we're going to do. Sophia and Edward's first week in the new apartment was a period of adjustment for both. He, accustomed to delegating household chores and family care, now found himself preparing breakfast, choosing clothes, taking and picking up his daughter from school. Sophia, in turn, slowly awakened from a long period of fear and repression, cautiously testing the limits of her newfound freedom. Can I have more cereal? She asked one morning, her hand hesitant over the cereal box, her eyes attentive to her father's reaction. Edward felt his heart clench. Such a simple gesture, and his daughter still feared a reprimand. "Of course, Princess. You can have as much as you want." Sophia smiled shyly, serving herself another generous portion. The apartment gradually came to life. The walls of Sophia's room were painted sun yellow, as she had wished. Edward hired a decorator to help, but insisted that his daughter participate in every decision. The canopy bed she chose, the butterfly curtains, the tree-shaped bookshelf. Little by little, the environment filled with toys, books, and small objects that reflected the personality of the girl emerging from the cocoon of fear. Edward was surprised to discover that his daughter loved dinosaurs, something he never would have guessed, as Lucy insisted that girls should like princesses and dolls. In sessions with Dr. Claudia, who now met with father and daughter weekly, both learned to reconnect. It's important to understand that recovery is not linear, the psychologist explained during a private session with Edward. There will be good days and difficult days. Sophia was subjected to chronic stress that left its mark. She developed defense mechanisms that won't disappear overnight. "What signs should I look for?" Edward asked, determined not to fail his daughter again. Frequent nightmares, regression to infantile behaviors like bedwetting, isolation, sudden mood swings. But also look for positive signs: more smiles, more initiative, greater willingness to explore and try new things. Edward nodded, mentally noting every detail. At night, after Sophia fell asleep, he often read books on child development, psychological trauma, and positive parenting. The businessman's library, once full of administration and economics books, was now diversifying. Raphael Stone remained present, making regular visits as determined by the judge. But what had started as a professional obligation had become a genuine friendship. The social worker admired Edward's determination to transform his life for his daughter, and Edward respected Raphael's dedication to the children he served. "How are things at the company?" Raphael asked during one of his visits, as he watched Sophia feeding the colorful fish in the new aquarium that decorated the living room. "Different," Edward admitted. "I delegated daily administration to my vice president. I still participate in strategic decisions, but remotely. Some investors didn't like it. They think I lost focus. Maybe they're right. And does that worry you?" Edward watched his daughter, who was now humming to the fish, inventing a song about the underwater world. "Surprisingly, no. For the first time, I understand what Clarice was trying to tell me. There are things more important than quarterly results and market value." As the new routine settled in, Edward decided to undertake a painful but necessary task: retrieve what he could of Sophia's belongings and memories that remained in the old mansion. Lucy had already moved out, forced to leave the property after the expedited divorce proceedings. Even so, Edward hired a specialized moving company to carry out the move, avoiding returning to that place personally. The employees brought boxes of clothes, some books, dusty toys found in the attic, items that Lucy had hidden instead of discarding. But many of Sophia's most precious memories, especially those related to Clarice, seemed lost forever. "Do you think Aunt Lucy threw away Mummy's book?" Sophia asked one night, as Edward tucked her into bed. He knew exactly which book she was referring to, a special edition of The Little Prince that Clarice used to read to Sophia every night. "I don't know, my love. But we can buy another one if you want." Sophia shook her head. "It wouldn't be the same. That one smelled like Mommy, and the little marks she made on the pages." Edward kissed his daughter's forehead, feeling helpless in the face of that seemingly irreparable loss. The next day, he received an unexpected phone call. "Mr. Madison, this is Eleanor." "Eleanor, so good to hear your voice. How are you?" "Susie Wisher, well, thank goodness. I got a new job with a good family right here in South Beach, but I called for another reason." She paused. "I have something that belongs to Sophia, something I saved when Lucy was going to throw it away." Edward felt his heart race. "The book?" "Yes, sir. The Little Prince. And a few other things, photos of Clarice, some of the girls' drawings, a very old teddy bear. Eleanor, you can't imagine what this means to us." That same afternoon, Edward and Sophia met Eleanor at a cafe near the beach. The former employee carried a seemingly simple cloth bag, but it contained invaluable treasures. "It's all here, my little flower," she said, handing the bag to Sophia. I kept it with great care. Sophia opened the bag with trembling hands. The first item she took out was the book. A worn blue cover, slightly yellowed pages, with small annotations in the margin made by Clarice's hand. The girl hugged the book to her chest, silent tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Aunt Eleanor," she whispered. Then came the photos, baby Sophia in her mother's arms, Clarice teaching Sophia to walk, the family of 3 on a picnic in the park. Concrete memories of a happy time that the girl was beginning to fear she had imagined. Finally, Sophia pulled a one-eyed, faded and mended teddy bear from the bag, clearly much loved. "Buddy," she exclaimed, hugging the toy as if reuniting with an old friend. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Edward, with tears in his eyes, hugged Eleanor. "I can never thank you enough for what you did." The woman wiped her own eyes. "I just wanted to do what was right, Mr. Madison. Clarice always treated me with respect. And this girl deserves to be happy." That night marked a turning point in Sophia's recovery. For the first time since returning to her father's home, she asked him to read The Little Prince before bed, resuming the ritual her mother had established years earlier. "Turn the page just like Mommy used to," she instructed, showing exactly how Clarice would make a little flourish when turning each leaf. Edward followed the instructions meticulously, moved to be able to continue something Clarice had started. When he finished the chapter, he noticed that Sophia was asleep, hugging both old Buddy and the new teddy bear he had given her. "2 teddy bears are better than 1, she had explained earlier. "One reminds me of Mommy, the other reminds me that you came back to me." The following weeks brought more progress. At school, Teresa Campbell reported that Sophia was gradually returning to participate in activities, raising her hand to answer questions, interacting with classmates during recess. Her grades, which had plummeted, were now beginning to rise again. At home, signs of trauma persisted but decreased in frequency. Sophia still checked if there was enough food in the refrigerator and sometimes hid snacks in her room, a habit Edward treated with kindness, without reprimands. Nightmares, once almost daily, became occasional. An important change in routine was the inclusion of genuine leisure moments. Edward, who previously barely took time to have dinner with his daughter, now dedicated entire weekends to activities with her, strolls in Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden, visits to Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, picnics at South Beach. It was during one of these outings, while flying a kite at Crandon Park, that Sophia surprised her father with a question. "Daddy, do you think one day I'll forget Mommy?" Edward adjusted the kite string before answering, thinking carefully. "No, my love. You won't forget. Memory may change over time. Some things you'll remember clearly, others may become hazy, but your mother will always be a part of you." Sophia nodded, thoughtful. "Aunt Lucy said I should forget, that remembering only hurt." "Aunt Lucy was wrong," Edward replied firmly. "Remembering the people we love and who loved us is never bad. It can bring longing. It can even make you cry sometimes, but it also brings strength. Your mother lives in you, Sophia. In your smile, in your eyes, in your curiosity for books." The girl smiled, illuminated from within. "Like the little prince. He lives in the stars, but also inside the people who love him." Edward felt his chest swell with indescribable pride. "Exactly like that, Princess." Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Lucy Vance faced the consequences of her actions. The press coverage, initiated by Martha Quinn, had brought to light other similar cases. Former stepchildren, now adults, broke years of silence to report similar experiences of manipulation and psychological abuse. The social circle that once flattered her now closed doors. The same people who applauded her impeccable style and presence at charity events now avoided being photographed beside her. The brands she worked for as an ambassador discreetly terminated their contracts. On a rainy afternoon, Lucy met Oliver Sampson in his office, no longer as a client, but as a close acquaintance seeking advice. "It's a nightmare, Oliver," she confided, her face for the first time without perfect makeup. "I'm being treated like a criminal. I lost contracts, invitations to events, even my club membership, all because of that brat and that meddling social worker." Oliver observed her with a mixture of pity and disapproval. "Lucy, you need to understand that your actions had consequences. What you did to that child—" "Oh, please," she rolled her eyes. "It wasn't that serious. How many children are much more mistreated out there and no one cares?" "This is exactly the kind of thinking that brought you here," Oliver replied seriously. "The inability to recognize the impact of your actions on others. What do you suggest, then? That I dress in black, cut my hair, and become a repentant nun? I suggest therapy, a deep process of self-discovery, and perhaps eventually a sincere apology." Lucy let out a bitter laugh. "Apologies to whom? To Edward, who traded me for the memory of his saintly deceased wife. To that child who always looked at me as if I were an intruder." Oliver stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "This is exactly why I withdrew from your case. Lucy, you can't see beyond yourself?" Alone in the taxi, returning to the small apartment she had rented after the divorce, Lucy allowed herself, perhaps for the first time in her life, to look at her own choices with some objectivity. She didn't feel regret. That emotion still seemed beyond her emotional reach, but she glimpsed the beginning of an understanding of where she had erred in her strategy. "I was careless," she murmured to herself, watching the rain through the car window. "Next time I'll be more careful." The next morning, Martha Quinn published another report in the series she had titled Invisible Childhoods. This time, she presented alarming statistics on emotional neglect and psychological abuse against children in blended families, focusing not only on high society cases, but also on low-income communities. The report ended with an appeal for greater social vigilance and effective public policies for child protection. Edward read the article during breakfast, while Sophia got ready for school. The journalist's words resonated deeply, making him reflect on how many other children might be living in situations similar to his daughter's, without the same support network or resources. An idea began to form in his mind. Perhaps there was a way to transform the family's painful experience into something positive for the community. That night, after tucking her into bed, Edward sat on the edge of Sophia's bed. "Princess, I want to tell you about an idea I had today. It's about a new project, different from anything I've ever done, and I'd really like to know what you think." 3 years had passed since that night when Edward shared his idea with Sophia. The girl, now 10 years old, skipped down the stairs 2 steps at a time, wearing denim overalls with small embroidered sunflowers and a yellow t-shirt. "Dad, we're going to be late for the inauguration," Edward smiled, adjusting his tie in front of the living room mirror. Sophia was unrecognizable compared to the frightened child of 3 years ago. Now she spoke loudly, laughed frequently, and expressed her opinions with the confidence of someone who knows they will be heard and respected. "Calm down, Princess. We still have half an hour." Sophia rolled her eyes, a typical preteen gesture. "But you promised we'd go early so I could show my drawing to Brenda." "And we will," he assured, grabbing the car keys. "I just needed to make sure I was presentable for the big occasion." The drive to the Liberty City neighborhood in western Miami was a contrast to the luxurious environment of South Beach where they lived. But in the last 3 years, Edward and Sophia had become familiar figures in that community. The idea born on that night of reflection had transformed into the Sunflower Institute, a center for welcoming and developing children in vulnerable situations. What began as a personal project soon grew larger, attracting partners, volunteers, and recognition. Today was the inauguration of its own headquarters, a spacious and colorful building, specifically built to meet the Institute's needs, with rooms for psychological counseling, art workshops, a library, space for physical activities, and a large garden, where naturally sunflowers predominated. "There's Raphael," Sophia exclaimed, pointing to the social worker who awaited them at the entrance. Raphael Stone, now technical director of the Sunflower Institute, had left public service to dedicate himself entirely to the project. His experience and dedication were fundamental in structuring the assistance programs, focused especially on the prevention and early identification of cases of psychological abuse and emotional neglect. "Good morning, Madison family," Raphael greeted as Sophia ran to hug him. "Ready for the big day?" "More than ready," Edward replied, shaking his friend's hand. "How are the preparations?" "Everything in order. The team is very excited. Families have started to arrive and the press is already positioned. Oh, and Martha Quinn asked for an exclusive interview with both of you after the ceremony." Martha, whose Invisible Childhood series of reports had become an award-winning book, had become an important ally in publicizing the Institute's work and raising awareness about children's rights. Sophia tugged at her father's hand. "Can I go see if Brenda has arrived yet?" "Of course, Princess. I'll be right behind you." As Sophia ran into the building, Raphael and Edward walked more slowly, observing the growing movement of guests and beneficiaries. "It's incredible what you've built in such a short time," Raphael commented. "Anyone who sees Sophia today so confident and happy can hardly imagine the frightened girl we knew." Edward nodded, moved. "She is my inspiration every day. Her resilience taught me more about strength and courage than any leadership course I've ever taken." Inside the building, the transformation was even more visible. What was once just a project on paper was now a vibrant space designed to welcome and nurture. On the walls, colorful drawings made by children served by the pilot program. Prominently displayed at the main entrance, a special mural, an immense field of sunflowers, where each flower had been painted by a different child. Sophia stood before this mural, proudly showing her contribution to Brenda, who now integrated the Institute's team as coordinator of the temporary shelter, a safe space for children in immediate risk. "Look, Brenda. Mine is this one, the biggest," the woman smiled, adjusting her glasses. "It's beautiful, my dear. And you know what's even more beautiful? To see how you've grown strong and luminous, like a true sunflower." Sophia hugged the woman who'd been so important in her most difficult moments. "That's what you taught me, remember? That even when planted in the shade, the sunflower always seeks the light." Across the hall, Eleanor, now supervisor of the Institute's support team, organized the final details of the cocktail party that would be served after the ceremony. Seeing Sophia, she waved affectionately. The girl returned the gesture with a warm hug. Teresa Campbell was also there, representing the educator training program the Institute had developed, an initiative to train teachers in identifying signs of abuse and neglect in the classroom. Gradually, the main auditorium filled up. In addition to authorities, partners, and the press, many community families were present, the first beneficiaries of the programs already implemented during the pilot phase. Edward went up to the stage, accompanied by Sophia. The girl who 3 years earlier could barely speak in public now seemed perfectly at ease before the audience. "Good morning, everyone," Edward began. "It is with immense joy that we officially inaugurate the headquarters of the Sunflower Institute. This project was born from a painful personal experience that fortunately had a positive outcome. But we know that many similar stories do not have the same ending." He paused, looking at his daughter with pride. "The Sunflower Institute exists to change that, to be a beacon that identifies, welcomes, and transforms, to show that, with the right support network, every child can flourish." Sophia stepped forward, taking the microphone naturally. "When I was little," she said, her clear voice echoing through the auditorium, "I thought I was alone, that no one saw what I was going through, that no one cared. But I was wrong. There were people watching, people who cared." She smiled at Raphael, Brenda, Eleanor, and Teresa Campbell. People who didn't give up on me, even when I had given up on myself. Edward felt his eyes well up, but he didn't interrupt. Sophia had rehearsed her speech for weeks, determined to use her own story to inspire other children. "The Sunflower Institute exists so that no child feels invisible," she continued. "So that all know they have a voice, that they have rights, that they deserve to be loved and respected. Our symbol is the sunflower because even on the darkest days, it always turns towards the light. As that's what we want for every child, the chance to find their own light." The audience erupted in emotional applause. Edward hugged his daughter, too proud to speak. After the official ceremony, with the ribbon cutting and the unveiling of the inaugural plaque, guests spread throughout the building, getting to know the different spaces and programs. Sophia made a point of acting as a guide for some groups, enthusiastically explaining every detail of the project she had helped conceive. During a break, Edward met with Martha Quinn for the promised interview. "This institute is just the beginning," he explained to the journalist. "Our plan is to expand the model to other communities, form a statewide network and, who knows, a national one. Psychological abuse and emotional neglect are silent forms of violence against children, often invisible even to close people. We need to change that." "And what about Sophia?" Martha asked. "How is she coping with the exposure of her personal story?" "It was her decision," Edward replied. "Of course, we preserved many details, but Sophia understood early on that sharing her experience could help other children. She's a little activist now, more engaged in the cause than I am sometimes. Martha smiled. And Lucy Vance. Any contact since then? Edward's expression became more serious. None, fortunately. From what I heard, she left the country after the lawsuit. I sincerely hope she found help for her problems. The truth was that, in the 3 years that had passed, Edward had developed a more complex understanding of his ex-wife. The initial anger had given way to a kind of distant pity. Lucy was, herself, a product of a cycle of violence and neglect that had never been adequately addressed. And what about new relationships? Martha asked with a teasing smile. Is there room for a new love in the Madison family's life? Edward laughed, relaxed. At the moment, we're focused on the Institute and our reconnection as father and daughter. But who knows what the future holds? Sophia has already told me she doesn't oppose the idea, as long as the candidate passes her rigorous approval. On the other side of the hall, Sophia was talking animatedly with Annie, the girl who had lent her the teddy bear at the shelter, and who now, at 12, was her best friend. The two attended different schools, but maintained a strong bond, strengthened by the Institute's activities, where Annie participated as a beneficiary. Look who's here, Annie said, pointing to the entrance. Sophia turned and her face lit up. Daniel Oliver, a pediatric physician and volunteer at the Institute, entered carrying a large package wrapped in colorful paper. In recent months, Daniel had become a constant presence in the Madisons' lives. A widower at 40, he had dedicated himself to social pediatrics after losing his wife to cancer. His daughter, Louisa, 11, quickly befriended Sophia during the Institute's activities. Sophia, Daniel called, smiling. Louisa and I brought a gift for the Institute. The girl ran to him, curious. What is it? Open it and find out. With Louisa's help, who had appeared behind her father, Sophia tore open the wrapping paper, revealing a framed picture, an enlarged reproduction of the cover of The Little Prince, framed in wood. For the library, Daniel explained. Louisa remembered it was your mom's favorite book. Sophia hugged Louisa first, then Daniel. It's perfect. We'll hang it on the main wall where everyone will see it. Edward watched the scene from afar, smiling. The friendship between the girls and the increasingly close relationship with Daniel were unexpected but welcome developments. As Sophia had said in one of their nightly conversations, I think Mommy would be happy to see us building a bigger family, Dad. In the late afternoon, when most of the guests had already left, Edward, Sophia, Raphael, and their closest friends gathered for a small celebratory dinner in the Institute's garden. Under the orange sky of the Miami evening, surrounded by sunflowers in full bloom, they toasted the project's success. To the Sunflower Institute, Raphael proposed, raising his glass of juice. May it be a beacon for many children. To the guardians, Edward added, those who see the invisible and hear the silence, may they never give up. Sophia, sitting between her father and Daniel with Louisa beside her, raised her own glass. To the little sunflowers, she said, looking at the other children present. May they always find the light even on the darkest days. Later, driving home in the car, Sophia watched the stars beginning to dot the night sky. What are you thinking about, Princess? Edward asked. Mommy, she replied without sadness. I think she would be proud today. I'm sure she would, my love. You know, Dad, I remember something she always said before bed. Even when you can't see me, I'll always be here. For a long time, after she became a star, I thought that wasn't true, that she had abandoned me. Edward waited, giving Sophia space to continue. But now I understand what she meant. She's here, she touched her own chest, in the way I see the world, in the things I learned from her, in the stories we keep. And she's also here, she pointed to her father, in the way you protect me, in the way you teach me new things, in the way you make me feel safe. Edward swallowed the lump in his throat, moved by his daughter's wisdom. And you know what's coolest? Sophia continued. Now she's also in the Institute, helping other children through what we learned from our story. Upon arriving home, Sophia ran to her room, now decorated with a balanced mix of dinosaurs, books, and posters of teen bands. Old Buddy and the newer teddy bear shared a place of honor on the bed, along with some new furry friends. Edward paused at the door, watching his daughter organize her materials for school the next day. How is it possible that this same child, 3 years earlier, trembled with fear when performing the simplest task? "Dad," Sophia interrupted his thoughts, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, princess." "Do you think one day I can be a social worker like Raphael?" Edward smiled. "I think you can be whatever you want, Sophia. And you'll be amazing in any path you choose." The girl nodded, thoughtful. "I want to help other children. Not just with the institute, but directly, you know. I want to be for someone what Raphael was for me. Someone who sees, who listens, who doesn't give up." "That's a noble goal," Edward replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "And I'm sure you'll achieve it." Later, after the nightly reading ritual, now shared with each reading a page, Edward watched his daughter fall asleep. Beside the bed, framed, was the photo Eleanor had saved. Clarice and Sophia in the garden under the sun, surrounded by sunflowers. "Thank you, my love," he whispered to the photo of his late wife, "for giving me the greatest gift of my life. I promise I will always protect her." The next day at the Sunflower Institute, a new family arrived for assistance. A single mother, 2 small children, a history of domestic violence. The youngest, a girl of just 5 years old, huddled behind her mother, her eyes wide with fear. Sophia, who helped with initial welcoming on Saturdays, approached slowly and knelt to be at the child's height. "Hi," she said softly. "My name is Sophia. What's yours?" The girl hesitated, looking at her mother for approval. After a slight nod, she replied in a low voice, "B." Sophia smiled, offering her hand. "Do you want to see our garden, B? We have the most beautiful sunflowers in Miami." The little girl looked at the outstretched hand, still hesitant. Sophia waited, patient. She knew better than anyone that trust was something that was built slowly. Finally, B took a step forward and held the offered hand. "What's a sunflower?" she asked in a low voice. Sophia smiled, leading her to the sun-drenched garden. "A sunflower is a very special flower," she explained. "No matter where it's planted, it always finds a way to turn towards the sun. Did you know we can be like sunflowers too? Even on the hardest days, we can look for the light." As they walked through the garden, hand in hand, Sophia felt a wave of gratitude for everyone who had helped her on her journey, and the quiet certainty that it was now her turn to give back, being for others what someone once was for her, a beacon in the darkness, an outstretched hand, a constant presence that says, with words and actions, "I'm here. You are not alone." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Sophia and Edward's story has touched your hearts. To follow this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating narratives. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your comments.